Marvin was the face of tough guy movies, but his final years were anything but fearless. Behind the rough roles and hard stare was a man fighting inner struggles and fading fame. His once grand home now sits empty, a ghostly shell of Hollywood's golden past. From his stormy relationships with his wife and children to the haunting truth about his tragic death and surprising net worth. This is the little-known ending to a larger-than-life legend. When it comes to Lee Marvin's real estate, we can't miss his Tucson, Arizona desert ranch home. Some sources said that he found peace and quiet far from the Hollywood spotlight in here. Nestled in the scenic foothills, Marvin's desert retreat showed the rustic elegance and timeless regional style created by Swiss-born architect Josias Josler, built in 1936. This amazing single-story adobe home became one of Marvin's most loved homes. A quiet, safe place where the hard-edged actor could unwind, think, and live close to the natural world he so loved. Covering about 12.2 acres of beautiful Sonoran desert landscape, the home remains a striking example of Josler's building vision. Known for smoothly blending European influence with Southwestern practicality, Josler made homes that were both beautiful and built to last in the harsh Arizona weather. Marvin's home was no different. The thick handmade adobe walls provided both insulation and charm, while the exposed timber ceiling beams and hand-forged metalwork added an unmistakable sense of craftsmanship and heritage. The home's direction and large windows took full advantage of the surrounding scenery, providing ever-changing views of the desert plants, golden light, and distant mountains. Inside, the home featured an open floor plan that felt both grand and cozy. The soaring beamed ceilings created a sense of roominess, while cozy building touches such as alcoves, arched doorways, and a traditional wood-burning fireplace grounded the interior in warmth. Natural materials, stone, wood, clay, defined every corner, creating a touchable connection to the desert terrain just beyond the threshold. Marvin reportedly enjoyed the large living room where he could entertain close friends, sip a drink beside the fire, or simply sit in silence. Surrounded by the peace of the desert, the home also had features perfectly suited to the Arizona weather, including shaded porches, patios for outdoor dining, and a saltwater pool that offered refreshing relief from the summer heat. These outdoor living spaces further showed Josler's skill in merging indoor and outdoor environments, a building trademark that continues to define the region's most celebrated homes. The pool area, surrounded by mature desert landscaping, served as a peaceful oasis for Marvin and his guests, allowing for both relaxation and quiet thinking beneath the open sky. Marvin, a World War II veteran and lifelong lover of the American West, was drawn to places where the landscape spoke louder than city noise. His Tucson home was less a celebrity estate and more a rugged retreat that reflected his unpolished personality. Unlike the glitzy compounds of Beverly Hills or Palm Springs, this property symbolized a deeper connection to the land, raw, real, and lasting. The desert's vast stillness echoed the actor's own inner landscape, making the house more than just a place to live. It was, in many ways, a reflection of who he was at heart. Years after Marvin's death in 1987, the home came back into the public eye when it was listed for sale on Realtor.com, clearly promoted as the actor's former home. This proved its authenticity and brought back interest in both the home's building, Herod and Marvin's storied legacy. Lee Marvin's personal life was as textured and compelling as many of the hard-boiled roles he played on screen. Though known to audiences for his steely stare, commanding presence, and no-nonsense personality, his private world was a complex mixture of family devotion, stormy relationships, and ultimately, a return to lasting love. In April 1952, Marvin married Betty Ebling, a union that marked the beginning of a family life that would define much of his off-screen identity during the 1950s and early 1960s. Together, they had 4 children, a son, Christopher Lamont Marvin, born the same year they wed, and 3 daughters, Courtney Lee, Cynthia Louise, and Claudia Leslie, who was born in 1958. The family settled into a relatively quiet life, though Marvin's rising fame in Hollywood eventually brought increasing strain to the marriage. Despite the success of Marvin's acting career, marked by his Academy Award win for Cat Ballou in 1965, his marriage with Betty was falling apart behind the scenes. After years of tension, the couple separated for 2 years before officially divorcing in January 1967. Their split was not without its share of emotional fallout. In her 2010 memoir, Tales of a Hollywood Housewife, a memoir by the first Mrs. Lee Marvin, Betty Ebling, offered an honest and unflinching account of their years together. She detailed the pressures of living with a man so deeply immersed in the myth of rugged masculinity, but who was at times emotionally distant and unpredictable. Perhaps most notably, she claimed that Marvin had an affair with actress Anne Bancroft, an allegation that, though unconfirmed by Marvin himself, added to the legend of his complicated romantic life. Following his divorce, Marvin entered one of the most publicized relationships of his life with actress Michelle Triola. Their 6-year partnership never resulted in marriage, but it did spark a landmark legal case after their split. Marvin v. Marvin, a widely covered lawsuit in which Triola sought financial compensation under the claim that they had shared a marriage-like relationship. The case brought the term palimony into the American legal and cultural vocabulary, making headlines across the country and painting Marvin as both a reluctant symbol of modern relationships and a man caught between old Hollywood traditions and changing social norms. Yet in the aftermath of that media storm, Marvin's life took a quieter, more thoughtful turn. In 1970, he reconnected with Pamela Feely, a woman he had known since childhood. Their bond, rooted in a shared past and familiar warmth, provided a stabilizing force after the upheavals of the previous decade. Marvin married Pamela later that year, and the two remained together until his death in 1987. Their marriage marked a return to emotional grounding for Marvin, a relationship away from the headlines, built on companionship and shared history rather than celebrity spectacle. After Marvin's passing, Pamela honored their life together by writing a romance published in 1997. The book served not only as a love letter to her late husband, but also as a personal window into the private life of a man who had become a cultural icon. Through Pamela's eyes, Marvin was revealed to be more than the rough-and-tumble anti-hero of film. He was also a man of quiet affection, deep loyalty, and complex emotion. Tragedy would later visit Marvin's legacy in another form. Two of his children, Claudia Leslie and Christopher Lamont, died before him, passing away in 2012 and 2013, respectively. Despite the fame and fortune, Marvin's family life bore both joy and sorrow, shaped by the complexities of love, fame, and human frailty. One thing you may have missed about Lee Marvin is his community property case. In 1971, he found himself at the center of one of the most groundbreaking and controversial legal battles in Hollywood history, a case that not only reshaped the boundaries of domestic partnerships in the public eye, but also gave rise to a new legal term, palimony. The lawsuit was filed by his former live-in girlfriend, Michelle Triola, whose last name he never legally gave her, but which she adopted voluntarily. Their relationship had ended the year prior after living together for 5 years. From 1965 to 1970, what followed was a legal and cultural storm that would forever link their names in American legal history. Michelle Triola, a dancer and aspiring actress, met Marvin during the height of his fame. Their relationship, though never made official by marriage, mirrored the structure of a traditional domestic union. They shared a home, lived as a couple, and according to Triola, had made verbal agreements about sharing income and property. After the relationship ended, Triola filed a lawsuit against Marvin claiming that she had sacrificed her own career to support his and that he had promised to provide for her financially for life. Her claims were emotionally charged and detailed. Triola alleged that during the course of their relationship, she became pregnant by Marvin 3 times. 2 of those pregnancies, she said, ended in abortions that he paid for, and the third ended in a miscarriage. Most tragically, she claimed the second abortion left her unable to have children in the future. These revelations added deeply personal and painful layers to an already high-profile case, fueling widespread media coverage and public interest. The lawsuit demanded financial compensation, similar to what a legal spouse might receive in the event of a divorce, spousal support, or alimony, despite the absence of a marriage certificate. The case Marvin v. Marvin made its way to the California Supreme Court and resulted in a landmark 1976 decision. In it, the court ruled that while non-marital partners were not automatically entitled to the same rights as married spouses, agreements made between partners, either verbal or implied, could be legally binding and enforceable under contract law. This gave rise to the legal concept now widely known as palimony, a fusion of the words pal and alimony signifying support payments to a former partner who was never legally a spouse. The court's decision opened the door to a wave of similar lawsuits in subsequent years, particularly in California, where living together without marriage was becoming more common. However, while the court acknowledged the possibility of such agreements, it did not side entirely with Triola. After years of legal battles, including a lengthy trial in 1979, the court found that no such agreement existed in her case and ultimately ruled in Marvin's favor. Triola was awarded no financial support beyond what Marvin had already provided. During their relationship, still, the trial had a lasting impact not only on California law, but also on American cultural attitudes toward living together and non-traditional partnerships. The case highlighted the legal gray areas that existed for unmarried couples sharing lives, finances, and futures, and it forced lawmakers and courts to take those realities more seriously. The notoriety of the case also turned Michelle Triola into a public figure in her own right. While some saw her as a trailblazer for women's rights and relationship equity, others viewed her actions through a more critical lens, accusing her of exploiting her relationship with Marvin for financial gain. For Lee Marvin, a man known for his tough exterior and stoic screen presence, the lawsuit was an unwelcome intrusion into his private world. He maintained that he had supported Triola generously during their time together and that no promises of lifelong support had ever been made. Still, the trial and the ensuing media frenzy left a lasting mark on his personal and public image. It pulled him unwillingly into a legal drama as intense as any film role he had ever played, with repercussions that extended far beyond his own life. The legal saga between Marvin and Michelle Triola reached its climax in 1979, marking a pivotal moment in American family law and further intensifying the public spotlight on one of Hollywood's most contentious and culturally significant breakups. After years of litigation following their 1970 split, the Los Angeles Superior Court made a landmark ruling. Marvin was ordered to pay Triola $104,000 for rehabilitation purposes. This amount was meant to assist her in re-establishing herself professionally and financially after dedicating years to their domestic partnership. While this award was a partial victory for Triola, it fell far short of her original claims. Triola had sought half of the $3.6 million Marvin earned during the 6 years they lived together, arguing that their relationship, though never made official by marriage, had functioned as a marital union in every practical sense. However, the court drew a firm distinction between the rights given to legally married spouses and those in non-marital relationships. It concluded that California's community property laws, which ensure equal division of property and income acquired during a marriage, did not automatically extend to couples who had simply lived together without being married. In its ruling, the court emphasized that for partners in non-marital relationships to share community property-like rights, there must be a clear agreement, either written or verbal, between the parties, stating that they intended to share earnings and assets. In the absence of such a contract, the law could not presume equal entitlement. While the judge initially accepted the idea that Triola had sacrificed her own career to support Marvin, the court was not convinced that he had promised to share his wealth or support her indefinitely. The $104,000 rehabilitation award acknowledged some moral responsibility on Marvin's part, recognizing Triola's contributions to their household and the life they shared. However, the court stopped short of endorsing her broader financial claims. The decision was controversial, balancing modern ideas about partnership and equity with the legal requirement for clear contractual evidence. It essentially carved out a new legal landscape for cohabiting couples. Personal promises were no longer enough. Proof of intent to share assets had to be concrete and demonstrable. But the legal battle didn't end there. In August 1981, the California Court of Appeal reviewed the case and overturned the lower court's decision. The appellate court concluded that no enforceable contract, written or oral, existed between Marvin and Triola regarding shared financial obligations or support. As a result, the $104,000 award granted to Triola was nullified. The ruling became a definitive statement on the limits of palimony. While courts might recognize contracts between non-partners, they would not assume them. Without clear and mutual agreement, no financial entitlement existed. The aftermath of the case had a profound impact not only on Marvin's personal life, but on American family law. It set the standard for how courts would handle cohabitation disputes moving forward, signaling that the emotional reality of a long-term relationship would not in itself carry legal weight unless backed by a verifiable contract. Legal scholars, celebrities, and the public followed the case closely, recognizing its implications in a rapidly changing cultural landscape, where non-traditional relationships were becoming more common. As for Michelle Triola, though, the lawsuit didn't yield the financial outcome she had hoped for. She continued to live a public life. In a twist of fate, shortly after her breakup with Marvin, she began a long and stable relationship with actor Dick Van Dyke in 1976. The two remained together for more than 3 decades, offering a quieter, more enduring love story after the turmoil of the Marvin case. Triola never married again, but became known as both a symbol of a woman asserting her rights in a shifting legal landscape and as a devoted partner in her later years. In the aftermath of the infamous Marvin v. Marvin case, public interest did not wane. It only intensified. The highly publicized trial, which introduced the term palimony into American legal discourse, took on a life of its own in the media and popular culture. For Marvin, the courtroom battle over financial support for his former partner Michelle Triola was not only legally grueling, but personally humiliating. Years later, in a moment of raw honesty or perhaps frustration, Marvin added fuel to the fire by characterizing the trial as a circus. His blunt statement that everyone was lying, even I lied, sparked fresh waves of controversy and raised serious questions about the integrity of the testimony delivered during the proceedings. These remarks were widely quoted and dissected in the press, casting a long shadow over the credibility of the trial's participants. Marvin's admission to lying under oath quickly caught the attention of legal commentators and law enforcement. Perjury, knowingly making false statements while under oath, is a serious criminal offense, and the suggestion that a central figure in a high-profile civil case had committed it was no small matter. Officials reportedly considered investigating Marvin for perjury, and there were public calls for accountability. However, no formal charges were ever brought against him, whether due to a lack of actionable evidence, legal complexity, or a desire to let the matter rest. Prosecutors chose not to pursue the case further. This lack of legal follow-up didn't spare Marvin from public scrutiny. His candidness, while perhaps admirable in its brutal honesty, reopened wounds from the trial and tarnished perceptions of his character. For some, his admission painted him as a flawed but self-aware man caught in an emotionally taxing ordeal. For others, it appeared to confirm suspicions that the trial was less about justice and more about manipulation, strategy, and damaged pride. At the same time, the case's bizarre twists and emotionally charged details made it ripe for satire in the world of entertainment. American television, ever eager to poke fun at real-life drama, quickly seized on the cultural moment. One of the most memorable comedic interpretations appeared on Saturday Night Live, which used the case as inspiration for its popular recurring sketch, Point Counterpoint. The format, featuring exaggerated arguments between fictional pundits, was a perfect vehicle to parody the he-said-she-said dynamic that dominated the Marvin Triola dispute. With sharp dialogue, biting humor, and an undercurrent of social commentary, the sketch turned a real legal battle into a comedic symbol of the era's changing gender politics and legal norms. Another notable parody came from The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, the reigning king of late-night television. Carson, a master of observational humor, capitalized on the case's notoriety with a skit in which he portrayed Adam while guest Betty White played Eve. The scene lampooned the notion of ancient relationship disputes being settled in modern courtrooms, cleverly drawing parallels between biblical unions and contemporary legal wrangling. Betty White, known for her razor-sharp timing and subtle wit, played off Carson's performance perfectly. Their dynamic turned what had been a painful legal fight into a universal, if absurd, tale of love, blame, and miscommunication between the sexes. These sketches were more than just entertainment. They signaled how deeply the Marvin case had permeated the American consciousness. It was no longer just a legal dispute or celebrity gossip. It had become a cultural touchstone. The case spoke to shifting societal values around cohabitation, gender roles, and the evolving definition of partnership outside traditional marriage. Through humor, late-night and sketch comedy helped audiences process the social anxieties and tensions that the case embodied. By the final years of his life, Lee Marvin, legendary actor, decorated World War II veteran, an icon of rugged masculinity, was battling serious health problems brought on in part by decades of heavy smoking and drinking. Though his screen presence remained tough and commanding, his physical strength was quietly weakening. The man who once strode across the silver screen in war epics and gritty westerns was facing a much more personal and difficult fight, one against his own deteriorating health. In December 1986, Marvin's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. He was hospitalized for more than 2 weeks due to complications related to coccidioidomycosis, also known as valley fever, a fungal infection contracted from spores found in the arid soils of the southwestern United States, particularly in regions like Arizona and California, where Marvin had spent a significant portion of his life. For most people, valley fever results in flu-like symptoms, but in individuals with compromised health, it can escalate dangerously. Marvin's case was severe. The infection spread to his lungs and caused respiratory distress, forcing doctors to administer high-dose steroids in an effort to reduce inflammation and support his breathing. While the steroids helped stabilize his lung function, they also triggered severe side effects. His already weakened body struggled to cope with the powerful medication. Tragically, he suffered major intestinal ruptures, a critical and life-threatening complication. In response to the rupture, Marvin underwent a colectomy, a surgical procedure involving the removal of all or part of the colon. This invasive operation is typically performed only in extreme cases, and for Marvin, it marked a further decline in his overall health. Though he survived the surgery, it left him physically fragile and diminished, a shadow of the robust figure who once dominated Hollywood with his gravelly voice and steely gaze. Despite his long and arduous recovery, Marvin's health never fully rebounded. Less than a year later, on August 29, 1987, Lee Marvin died of a heart attack at the age of 63. The news of his death reverberated through the entertainment industry, with fans and colleagues alike mourning the loss of a man who had redefined the anti-hero archetype in American cinema. Though known for playing hard-edged characters with moral ambiguity, off-screen Marvin was remembered as loyal, principled, and unpretentious, a war hero who never forgot his roots or the cost of fame. Fittingly, Marvin was laid to rest with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, a distinction that underscored not just his film legacy, but also his valor as a combat veteran. Before his acting career, Marvin had served in the U.S. Marine Corps during World War II, fighting in the brutal Battle of Saipan. where he was wounded and later awarded the Purple Heart. His military service remained a central part of his identity throughout his life, and his burial at Arlington signified national recognition of his contributions both in uniform and on screen. Marvin's funeral brought together friends, family, and former military comrades, all paying tribute to a man who had lived with intensity and purpose. He was buried alongside thousands of other American servicemen and women beneath the quiet dignity of Arlington's rolling green hills, far from the glare of the spotlight, but exactly where he belonged. His grave, marked by a simple white headstone, serves as a lasting symbol of his dual legacy, Hollywood star and wartime hero. Are you curious about Lee Marvin's early years before he became famous? His lineage is traced deep into American history, and though he would come to personify a rough-edged, rebellious masculinity on screen, his early life was steeped in both tradition and privilege. His father, Lamont Waltman, Marvin Sr., was a World War I veteran who had served with the Army Corps of Engineers before transitioning to a civilian career as an advertising executive. His mother, Courtney Washington Davidge Marvin, worked as a fashion writer, reflecting a family well-positioned within New York's cultural and intellectual circles. Marvin's ancestry was a source of historical intrigue. He was a first cousin 4 times removed of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, an ironic connection considering that Marvin would later play tough anti-establishment characters in war films and westerns. Additionally, he was a second cousin 6 times removed of George Washington, the first president of the United States. This rich lineage also included Matthew Marvin Sr., a direct ancestor who immigrated from Great Bentley, Essex, England, in 1635 and was among the founders of Hartford, Connecticut. The Marvin family tree was in many ways a tapestry of America's past, rooted in war, governance, and pioneering spirit. Despite these distinguished connections, young Lamont Marvin Jr. did not conform easily to traditional expectations. He began studying the violin in childhood, but music held little interest for him compared to the lure of the outdoors and the thrill of physical adventure. School was an even greater challenge. He disliked structured education and consistently performed poorly in academic settings. As a boy, he found refuge, not in books or instruments, but in the untamed landscapes of the American South. During his teenage years, he often escaped into the wilds of Florida's then uncharted Everglades, where he spent weekends hunting deer, bobwhite, quail, wild turkey, and even puma. These early experiences instilled in Marvin a deep connection to nature and a rugged independence that would later become defining traits in his public persona. His rebellious nature frequently put him at odds with authority figures. He was expelled from multiple schools for a litany of behavioral issues, smoking cigarettes, cutting classes, fighting with other students, and struggled to fit into the structured environments that demanded conformity. At a time when discipline and obedience were expected of boys from respectable families, Marvin charted his own unruly course. His parents tried various educational environments in hopes of taming his wild streak. During the late 1930s, he was sent to the Manumet School, a progressive Christian socialist boarding school in Pawling, New York. The school's emphasis on cooperative living and social justice stood in stark contrast to the elite military institutions popular among the upper classes. Although the school was known for encouraging creative expression, it wasn't a lasting solution for Marvin's restlessness. He later attended Peekskill Military Academy in Peekskill, New York, a school with a reputation for imposing strict discipline and preparing young men for service. But even that setting failed to restrain his defiant streak. After yet another expulsion, Marvin was finally enrolled at St. Leo College Preparatory School, a Catholic institution in St. Leo, Florida. Though more structured and religious in orientation, it offered Marvin one final attempt at stability before the looming specter of World War II would reshape his life entirely. What do you think about Lee Marvin? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.